Jalen Hurts getting the 5 years, $255 million, 179 of it guaranteed, right? So you start thinking, what does that, mean for Lamar? What does that say about Lamar? We'll get to that later, but let's start with that contract, right? So you remember when Mahomes got paid, everyone was like, oh my God, that is just a crazy amount. How are the Chiefs going to be able to field a team? That's a wild amount of money. But oddly enough, as this cap hit goes up more and more, they seem to win more and more because it's a contract extension, right? It doesn't kick in for a couple years. You got 2-3 years to kind of reset how you do contracts, maybe front load some other contracts. That way, when Mahomes' contract, which is more backloaded, kicks in, you'll be just fine. You'll still have the players. The contracts will work out. Right? The rest of the market, though, also goes up when you backload a contract and wait a little bit, right? Mahomes signed, 3 years ago? He's said to make like $50 million a year 3 years ago, which was a lot of money. Now it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's about right. The market's about $45 to $50 million for a top-end quarterback. And it's only going to continue to go up. They're only going to get more and more of a deal. I mean, this year he was the 6th highest paid quarterback. Patrick Mahomes, 6th highest paid. All right, so by the time it gets to the punitive part of the contract, it won't really be that punitive. It will be more of a steal. I get the same type of vibe from the Jalen Hurts contract. Now, I don't think he's Mahomes. I don't think he's a perennial MVP candidate, but could he be a top 7 to 8 quarterback almost every year? I do think so. And hell, I think he's going to host the next, 5 NFC Championship games, or at least 3 of the next 5. But he's not Mahomes. But he's also not in the AFC like Mahomes is. The Chiefs absolutely need Mahomes just to be able to get to the playoffs. Right? No, it's a good team, don't get me wrong. But since Tyreek Hill's gone, defense has taken a slight step back. Offensive line still in a little bit of a rebuild. They start playing a lot better last year. Right? But they need him just to get to the divisional round, the championship, what have you, right? But Jalen Hurts is in the NFC, specifically the NFC East. The Giants are paying great money to an average to below average starter in Daniel Jones. We'll get to him later. The Cowboys are paying great money for a slightly above average quarterback in Dak. And Washington's Washington. So by simply securing Jalen Hurts, I feel you almost secure a division title pretty much every year. He'll probably get you 3 to 4 out of the next 5 of that contract extension division titles, which means that they will play at least one home playoff game almost every year. At least one. So that's great on 2 fronts. Let's start with the football side. When Philly is rocking at home for a home playoff game, pretty much anything can happen. Dynamic quarterback, what we think is a really good coach, rowdy fans at home. If it's a night game, even more so. So anything can happen from a football standpoint, right? On the other front, the business front. If over the 5 years of that contract, Jalen gets you 4 home playoff games, even 3, it's worth it. That contract basically paid for right there, 3 to 4 home playoff games. Basically paid for. So that's all true. But remember, 2 things can be true at once. I do also think it's a slight overpay. I do. For a guy who, let's look at the facts here. I mean, let's look at all the quarterbacks who've lost Super Bowls in their first-ish appearance recently. Let's go the last 10 years. Right? Peyton Manning with the Broncos. I mean, my man was ancient. And it wasn't his first appearance. So I don't put a ton into that. Let's go Seattle with Russell Wilson. Lost the Super Bowl in his second appearance. Hasn't been back since. A lot of you guys say he's washed now. Cam Newton, Carolina, never went back, not in the league anymore. Matt Ryan, Falcons, off a cliff. Tom Brady, clearly an outlier. Jared Goff, got paid, then traded. Now he's just kind of an average quarterback in the league. Jimmy G, hasn't been back. He's not even on the same team as he was when he went. And his team basically gave up on him. I mean, they drafted his replacement. Mahomes, Burrow, Hurts, seems a little too early to tell on all of them, but I think we know that they're not going to be busts in that sense and not go back. So I'm just saying, you have Cam, Russ, Matty Ice, Jared Goff, Jimmy G, or we have Mahomes, Burrow, Brady. Could he be closer to the Mahomes, Burrow, Brady group? Sure he could. Do I have a feeling he's going to be somewhere in the middle, closer to the other group of guys, maybe get back once? More like a Russell Wilson type career than a Patrick Mahomes type of career? I do think he's going to have more of that type of career than hey, I'm going to basically go to the Super Bowl almost every year. I mean, we thought that Russ was unreal. We thought it was bound to be a 15-year dynasty. He's been good. He's been good, but he's never been close to winning at the clip that he was when he was going to the Super Bowls. So two things can be true at once. I do think they secure, at bare minimum, a really nice, solid team that can win you 9, 10 games, which in that division, in that conference, is good enough to probably host a playoff game. Can they rip off a couple 11, 12-win seasons? Maybe get the number 1 or 2 seed and host 2 playoff games? Absolutely possible. Am I going to sit here and be like, oh, it's a slam dunk? Not really. Not really. We've seen this story before, and we've seen it go pretty poorly before, to be quite honest with you. So pump the brakes a little bit. Good for them. They lock up the quarterback of the future. They have cost certainty, which is certainly important. Now you know what you're paying them. You can go out and get guys with the remaining cap space. You know what you have to draft. You have your quarterback solved. It gives you an identity that you can build around, a cornerstone. But I don't think it means that they're a perennial Super Bowl team like they were this year. Not even close. Playoff games? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's value in that. There's a ton of value in that. Big Ben, for example, won what? 2 in the first 5 years, 4 or 5 years? Went back once, lost, that was it. Last decade and a half of his career, almost nothing, right? But there's still value, and he won his division almost every year, won about eight playoff games after that, was consistently a really solid quarterback, won a ton of games, set a bunch of records. There's tons of value in that. I'm not saying there's not. But it's probably not going to be a Mahomes, Brady type situation. I'm just saying.
I get that argument, but Jalen Hurts is not the kind of guy that I would rush to pay. He is, and purely just based on the fact that we have seen such a small sample size from him.
Yeah.
I mean, coming into the year, last season, we didn't even have him in our top 10. I don't even know if he was in our top 15 coming into the season. He obviously played his way into the top 10 for sure. That's that's not a debate. He's played his way into that. But let's also not forget, week 14, 15, we were comparing him to Gardner Minshew.
Not good. It wasn't good.
It looked really unstable. He did not look great in the first parts of the playoffs. Really depended on the running game. Team kind of carried him until he got to the Super Bowl, and he had a hell of a performance in the Super Bowl, and I'm not going to take anything away from that.
Yeah.
But because of the small sample size, this is not a guy that I would have rushed to the register to pay for. I would not have.
I would agree.
I would have kept that one in the shopping cart for a bit. Maybe sat back, thought for a little bit more time on how it's going to pan out, what the future could look like with it. But at the end of the day, Jalen Hurts is a top 10 quarterback in the league, I would say.
Yeah.
I just would have given it a little bit more time if I was Philadelphia. But hey, good for Philly and good for Jalen. Yeah.